Well, more than 70 people have been killed and over 50 also injured following a fire at that illegally occupied building in the Johannesburg CBD on Thursday. The death toll is expected to rise as emergency services and police continue to comb the scene. For more on the story, we cross now to Nozintombi Miya, who is outside the building that caught fire. Nozintombi, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. So the K-9 unit has now arrived at this building.
Absolutely, Aldrin. As you can see, we're just going to try and walk a little bit closer towards the K-9 unit. But you'll see that the K-9 unit itself has just arrived now. And what is happening here is that the dogs are being given protective gear on their paws to make sure that they're not, they don't end up standing on any sharp objects or any debris that could end up injuring the dogs themselves. So you'll see that the dog that has been assigned to this emergency worker is being given these little protective dog shoes to assist as they go in, and you'll see that they're already starting now to go into the building itself. There's already a dog over there that is being sent in, and this is really important. It's important for emergency services as well as police to go inside and do a proper sweep of anything that had been left behind. While we do know that the 74 individuals had died yesterday, their remains were removed. But one very troubling aspect is that some of the individuals that had died had burned beyond recognition, and it was quite difficult for emergency workers to take out those people because they had burnt to such a degree that it was almost impossible for them to properly identify them and put them in one position or put them in one on one mortuary tray to be able to say that this is the individual. So those are the grisly, gruesome things that came out from yesterday, and this is why having the K-9 unit here is so important today, because they're going to be assisting with more of the search and rescue and recovery issues. Aldrin, one very important issue that came out around this building is the issue about the building being hijacked. Now, the use of the word a hijacked building is a colloquial term to refer to persons occupying a structure or a building that's not their building illegally. It is just a colloquial term to express the issue around the illegality of a structure being used by people that are not the owners of those structures. And with this building, we now know that this building used to actually be called the former Lindela building, and it used to be owned by Home Affairs in the city of Johannesburg. And this is where foreign nationals were brought to this building. They had some sort of housing, and there's a court at the top of the building. And that court was a court that assisted the foreign nationals coming into the country being processed and being able to get some sort of citizenship or some sort of papers when they came into South Africa. And as time progressed, what then happened with this building is that it was then converted into a shelter for women and children. The city of Johannesburg had initially owned this building, and it was renting out the building to the province. But it seemed that there was a problem between province as well as the city officials, and the building became fallow and it became derelict. And in the time that building became fallow and it became derelict, this is where the so-called syndicates then moved in and created an environment where they then rented out the rooms to different people. And we now know, 24 hours after this incident has happened, we now know the composition of the people here. It was not just foreign nationals, it was South African, it was a whole spectrum of people, poor people, desperate people, running away from whatever problems they had, poverty, crime, whatever issue they were running away from, that were staying here and that lived here. So we will get further clarity about the nationalities of the people as the information gets processed and the bodies at the mortuaries are processed, and officials continue with their identification and writing down all the details of the people affected in this building. So we know that that it's not just foreign nationals, it is South Africans, it is across the board. So this building itself, Eldrin, is a heritage site building. Again, it raises questions of how relations between local government and provincial government became so fraught that they could not put in place systems and processes to ensure that a heritage site building is preserved, it is taken care of, there is security. We have now ended up in a situation where 74 people have died, having lived in a structure that was a derelict structure, that had no water, that had no lights. The water and lights that were being sent or that were coming from this building, it was due to illegal connections. And that is that's how we've ended up in this catastrophe. The fact that a government did not take ownership and responsibility of a problem of their creation. Now we are seeing a scramble of authorities trying to put in place measures and systems and processes to try and speak to all the role players, but it's almost like this, they're trying to stop the horse after it's bolted. And that now becomes the problem, because they've become reactionary to the problem as opposed to having dealt with the problem in the first place, and we would not have ended up in this position. And that's the true tragedy. The tragedy is that government has let down its people by consistently dropping the ball in situations like this. Housing is a huge issue. It's a massive issue. The issue of residents, home affairs, massive issue. With government always being reactionary and not leading from the front, we have a situation like this that is exacerbated by multiple social ills and has led to an environment where 74 people, over 60 people displaced, and quite a number of people who say they used to stay in this building itself, standing outside this building, desperately trying to get in to see if they can go in and try and collect what goods they can, if there are any goods that they can try and collect. You'll recall that on the side that we're standing at, this is the front side of the building, and this is where most of the fire damage had taken place. On the sides and towards the back of the building, this was where a number of people had actually climbed out of the windows and jumped out of the windows. And the people that you're seeing standing right now in front of camera are those that have been trying since yesterday to go into the areas that were not as badly damaged to try and collect whatever documents they could collect, because many of them left with only the clothes that they had on their backs. And these are the issues that they're asking local government, and they're saying to local government, how can you assist us to get our papers, to get our official documents? We've lost everything, and they need to start from scratch. It's an issue of compassion. It's an issue of humanity, accountability, and we will see how that plays out throughout the course of the day as the day progresses, Eldrin.
Yeah, and we will be going to Hasina Gori next, but just quickly, Nozintombi, we heard from some of the survivors that there was rent that was paid to a so-called landlord. Has it been established as yet who this landlord is? Because these survivors are saying that they paid an average of around 1,200 Rand a month.
And you know, that's such an important question that you're asking, Eldrin. What we do know at this stage is that these are so-called syndicates that are operating in this building itself here. And I'm going to ask my camera colleague, Kwazi Manzi, to pan back to this building as we walk, and I complete with the question that you just asked me. We do know that there was a syndicate, and it was a syndicate made up of two groups. One group was the so-called Zulu syndicate, or the syndicate that was run by the Zulu gang or the Zulu group. There was one syndicate that was also run by the foreign nationals. And our understanding is that when they do identify these abandoned government buildings, they come in, and on this first level floor that you're seeing here, they immediately start building shacks and occupying and making sure that the police or the Red Ants or any officials cannot remove them. They know that according to the law of South Africa, if a structure has been occupied illegally by a tenant, and that tenant has paid some sort of money, The state is obligated, according to the Constitution, the state has to find alternative accommodation for those people. They cannot just remove them. So they're using the law that they know. They're using a law that was put in place to protect the vulnerable and the indigent for their own nefarious purposes. They then go and canvass around the city and find people who are desperate for accommodation, who are desperate for a place to live, and are not earning a salary or are running away from the law or whatever problems it is that those people have, and they're charging them 1,200, and that's just for a single room. So if you're a family, you could be paying up to 2,500. 1,200 is just the starting amount that we're hearing of what they were charging. And they then bring in their own security guards, and they then bring in gates and put security gates on each of these floors. Now, when we do get a chance to go into the building and the building has been cleared, we'll get a chance to see the security gates that emergency services had to cut through to get in to try and access and recover the bodies of those people that had died. And the security in this building itself, that security had locked this gate. Obviously, for security reasons, that security had locked the gate. And that meant that the people who tried to get out here were trapped inside this building. They could not go anywhere. Some of the people tried to go out from the doors. There's about 3 doors, 1, 2, 3. Where we're standing is the middle door. So they went out from the middle door and the third door that's on the side, and obviously some came out from the windows. But many of the people who tried to come out from this front door itself were trapped, and they could not come out because of the gates that are inside that were put in by these syndicates to create a sense of security for the people here. They're saying, give us 1,200, we will give you electricity, we will give you water, we will give you security. The lady we spoke to yesterday said that she wasn't paying for electricity, she wasn't paying for water, she was paying 1,200 rands to get that. And when the electricity cut out yesterday due to load shedding, they then ended up resorting to use candles. Some of them resorted up ending using paraffin stoves, gas stoves. And this is where we're hearing on the ground that that could possibly be the cause of the fire. We are obviously still waiting for the official word on what the true cause of the fire has been found to be after the police and emergency services have done their investigations. But on the ground, eyewitnesses that were there are claiming that this was caused either by a candle that had sparked, or either by one of the tenants who was using gas or using paraffin, and that had spilled over, caught fire in one of the cardboard boxes, and the blaze just spread within the blink of an eye. So it is going to be so important to find out from authorities. Firstly, Eldrin, how far are they in dealing with the syndicates that are taking advantage of the poor, the desperate and vulnerable, and occupying illegal buildings and hijacking illegal buildings and taking rental monies? Not only officials, police need to also go in and do raids and be able to effectively deal with that issue. Secondly, this is a heritage site building. Accountability needs to be taken about how a heritage site building has been left derelict to the extent that it was hijacked by these criminal syndicates. The final issue that needs to be taken into account, Eldrin, is the issue of what happens now. We're going to close off on these shots here of this building, but when you see this building, the structural integrity of the building has obviously been compromised because of the fire. The question now becomes, does this building get demolished and destroyed and the entire space reused for housing, or do they then go in and fix the bits that are, or the structural bits that have been damaged? Is that what they then do? They then fix the structural damage. What then happens? Because this building, Usindiso building, is a case study for the problems that the city has in terms of being able to maintain law and order and have officials, city officials, enforcing bylaws and making sure that buildings that are government buildings or private buildings that are unoccupied are consistently kept up to date. They're swept, there is security, and there are no illegal squatters, because the minute there are some sort of illegal squatters coming into the building, converting themselves to rental payers, that is where the problem becomes exacerbated, and we end up with the perfect storm that led to a tragedy that we saw yesterday. Aldrin.